Now, supposedly, there's talk that we're coming to the near end of the war in Iran, but depending on who you're speaking to, we are. But depending on who you also speak to, we're not. In this clip, we're going to see Professor John Mearsheimer expose the problem that Donald Trump is having with ending this war, and he's going to let us know a bit of insight as to how he sees that it's actually going to end. As usual, let's watch the clip in full. I'm going to give you guys my thoughts, commentary towards then. Let's get into it.
Joining me with his perspective is international relations scholar, Professor John Mearsheimer. Professor Mearsheimer, welcome back to Uncensored.
Thank you, Piers. I'm glad to be here.
How does this all end?
Well, hopefully we'll get some sort of negotiated settlement. It's not clear we're going to get it, though. I mean, at this point in time, we don't even have a ceasefire. It looked for a while like we had a ceasefire, but that's broken down because the Americans decided they were going to continue to blockade the Strait, which is in effect blockading Iran. And the Iranians, who had opened the Strait for one day, reclosed it. And now we have a situation where both sides are seizing cargo ships or oil tankers in a tit-for-tat war. And we haven't even gotten back to the negotiating table. Hopefully that will happen. But I would argue, Piers, even when we get back to the negotiating table, working out a deal is going to be extremely difficult because the two sides are so far apart.
Right, and the crux of it is that after a number of different aspirations that were espoused by the Americans at the start of the war, including regime change and so on, they seem to have centered now the Trump administration on we have to stop Iran developing a nuclear weapon as the purpose for the war, which means that the victory can only be achieved if that is established. And you can only establish that, it seems to me, if you can be seen to have provably destroyed or have surrendered Iran's enriched uranium. If you don't get that result, I don't see how you can claim to have stopped them developing a nuclear weapon should they seek to do so.
I think what you say is correct. There are two issues here, as you pointed out. One is eliminating nuclear enrichment capability altogether. And number two, getting the uranium that has been enriched up to 60% out of Iran. Those are going to be two extremely difficult tasks to do. I think they may be able to cut a deal where that 60% enriched uranium is moved out of Iran. But Iran is not going to give up its nuclear enrichment capability. And just to take this a step further, Piers, it's very important to understand that the nuclear enrichment issue is only one issue on the table. There's the whole question of sanctions, the question of reparations, the question of who's going to control the Strait of Hormuz in the future, and whether the Iranians are going to be allowed to have a toll booth in the middle of it. There's the whole question of what is the relationship between Iran and Hezbollah, Iran and Hamas. There's the whole question of American military bases in the region. I could go on and on. There are just a lot of issues that have to be settled if you can settle the nuclear enrichment issue, which is a difficult issue by itself.
Do you think the Americans have underestimated in a massive way the Iranian ability to control the Strait of Hormuz and their willingness to attack the Gulf state neighbors? Because it seems to me the double-pronged way they've gone about both of those things has been a very effective response to the military attack, in which they clearly faced overwhelming military superiority from the Americans and Israelis.
I think there's no question that President Trump and the Israelis, and here we're talking mainly about Prime Minister Netanyahu and the head of Mossad, David Barnea, who was a central figure in selling this strategy to both Netanyahu and Trump. As far as they're concerned, they completely misread the situation. They thought that the United States and Israel acting together could produce a quick and decisive victory. They thought that we could launch a shock and awe campaign, decapitate the regime, and we wouldn't even have to worry about the straits being shut down. Of course, that didn't happen. But it's very important to emphasize that if you look at what Trump's advisors were saying, people like Vance, people like Rubio, people like John Ratcliffe, who's the head of the CIA, General Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who was handpicked by President Trump, all four of those players, key players in the decision-making process, thought that this was not going to work. So it's really a case where President Trump and the Israelis on one side prevailed in the decision-making process, and we ended up in this disastrous war.
In terms of the economic and political issues for President Trump now, which he'll be weighing up, they talk about the economic damage that the blockade, for example, is causing the Iranians, but it's also, of course, causing, the longer the Strait of Hormuz remains pretty well closed, massive economic issues, not just for America, but for everyone that uses that strait. But the political damage of the rising gas prices, rising energy prices generally, also the more slow-burning rise in food prices because the fertilizer couldn't get through either. All this is politically very toxic for Donald Trump, isn't it? I mean, the polling already shows his approval rating hitting new lows. The number of Americans that oppose this war is rising. Those two numbers will only get worse for him as this goes on. And then he's got the midterms coming in November. What do you feel about the political fallout from this?
I think you're absolutely right that the economy is of central importance here. And the economy, the international economy, is in deep trouble. If things get worse, President Trump will be in even more trouble. And I think this is the principal reason that he decided to extend the ceasefire yesterday instead of going back to bombing Iran. President Trump understands full well that if he bombs Iran, Iran will retaliate by completely closing the Strait of Hormuz and shutting down the Red Sea as well. And this will have even further devastating consequences on the international economy. In fact, lots of people are arguing that we're in danger of moving into a world that looks like the Great Depression of the 1930s. So President Trump has a vested interest in settling this war as quickly as possible. In fact, if anything, he wanted to settle it yesterday, and that's why he extended the ceasefire. But the problem is he has no military option. He can't solve the problem with military force.
Yeah, that is what's so fascinating about how this war has played out. I also think that for all the bellicose rhetoric he has about we're going to take out all the power plants in Iran and so on and so on, the truth about that, the cold hard reality, is that Iran still maintains a huge number of ballistic missiles, and they could easily attack, as they've already shown a propensity to do, the oil refineries of the Gulf state neighbors. And they could go further, and if their own desalination plants get taken out in Iran, they could do the same to the Middle Eastern Gulf state neighbors. And if they did that, they could basically stop water supply in some of those states. I mean, it could be really incredibly serious, almost borderline apocalyptic for the people in those countries.
Absolutely. There's no question about it. They can basically destroy all 6 of the Gulf states because they have the missile capability to do that. And again, as I said, they can shut down the Red Sea. You want to understand that a lot of Saudi oil is still getting out because the Saudis have built a pipeline away from the Persian Gulf toward the Red Sea. So Saudi oil is coming out through the Red Sea. If they shut down the Red Sea and that Saudi oil does not come out and they shut down the Strait of Hormuz and no oil, no fertilizer, no aluminum, no helium comes out of the Gulf, this will have devastating consequences for the international economy. And at the same time, you want to understand that if we do use military force against Iran, not only are they going to retaliate, but they're not going to throw up their hands and surrender. The Iranians are nationalistic to the core, and furthermore, they view the United States and Israel as an existential threat, and that means they'll fight to the last person before they surrender. So we have no war-winning strategy, and we have a powerful imperative to just shut this one down as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I said the same thing on Fox last night on the 5. I just think Donald Trump should get out of this as best he can, as fast as he possibly can. I see no longer term way that this doesn't get a lot worse. Professor Mearsheimer, great to have you back. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, Piers.
So, when I always like to hear from Professor Mearsheimer. I've been watching some of the other videos that it is on YouTube that he's been appearing on. The reason as to why is when you have an international relations scholar, someone who's been a US-Israel foreign policy critic, it's always good to hear their insight and their reasoning behind what it is that they're saying. And when you align that with taking a look at what's actually taking place, you can see even in Donald Trump's rhetoric that he's having a major problem when it comes to ending this war. And for me, that then says that we need to call into question the man, the individual Donald Trump, because he is, from what it is that we see in terms of the reporting, he ignored every single expert that it is that he supposedly has within his cabinet. JD Vance, Rubio, Ratcliffe, the Joint Chief of the Joint Chiefs as well, have all said that the war wouldn't work. But Trump lent into and listens to Netanyahu instead. Now, I said this in a previous video before. I want you guys to think about this. Maybe I'm just, I'm thinking too deep into it. But remember, Donald Trump took a lot of money from what's her name? Is it a Mandelson? Adele Mandelson or something? I believe her name is. He took a massive amount of money from her. Now, when you take a look at Donald Trump's reasoning behind this, he literally ran on no new wars. He ran on America first. These are the promises he made to his base. You are actively seeing Donald Trump literally just, spitting in the face of all of his base. For someone to do something like that, I genuinely believe this was a promise that he made to Netanyahu, to people that are pro-Israel and Israel first. I feel like he made this promise to them first and foremost. And then after, now, he's actually following through with it. And regardless of what anybody says to him, he's still going through with it and still following through with it. That's just a theory that I'm throwing out there. I'm not saying that's the case. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comment section below. But like I said, for a man to go against his entire base and completely do a 180 based off what it is that he said, this is something completely different. And it just makes no sense. Donald Trump is backed into a corner when it comes to this war in Iran, and he can't find a way out. He can't. And because of the fact that everyone thought from a military standpoint, the United States are so much more superior versus Iran, but they didn't understand that this is a different level of warfare now. Iran aren't playing it militarily because they know America will have their number, but they're playing it from an economic standpoint. And now what it is that they're doing is this. They are now causing the rest of the world, other countries around the world, to be looking over their shoulder and looking in disgust at the United States as well as Israel. And it's working. It is working. Honestly, let me know your guys' thoughts on this clip in the comment section below. As usual, hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and turn on the bell notification. Hype up the video as well if it's something that you're willing and open to do. Appreciate you guys. I'll see you guys in the next one.